We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Erica LaCroix, Town Manager in Farmington, Maine. Can't wait to be out there in a couple weeks, and I hear it's just gorgeous right now. What a time. Erica, thanks for being on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, like I said, we're coming out the MTCMA, the Maine Town City Management Association. I think I said that right. Host their New England Management Institute here in August. Can't wait to come out and keynote that. And first time actually in Maine. I've been in most of the states throughout the country, but I haven't been to Maine yet. So I'm looking forward to coming up, and maybe we can swing a trip to Farmington in there. We'll see what we can do. But man, I look forward to hearing how someone who grows up in Maine finds their way out to Michigan, finds their way down to Virginia. You kind of been all over, the part, a good part of the United States. And how in the world did we end up in local gov? This is going to be a great story today, and hopefully encourage some young people as well as some current people serving in local government. So let's do what we do. Take us back to the very beginning and tell us about where you were born, Erica, and kind of the childhood that shaped you.
Yeah, so I was born and raised here in Maine, and from the age of 5, I wanted to be a veterinarian. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I was encouraged a lot in this area because there's a lot of rural land up here, right? We've got a lot of farmers of both crops and of livestock, and my passion happened to be horses and large animals, and I just thought that would be the greatest thing to do. I had parents who were workaholics. My mom's an artist, and you can add starving in front of that. And my father was a carpenter. So both creative people. And I just am a little more left-brained than they are. So, but they always had the attitude, even though we really didn't have any money, that there was no question about if I was going to go to college, I was going to go to college, and if I would be successful. And they really instilled that belief in me and the work ethic. And I think growing up in Maine, one thing that you really get, at least, I mean, all of us around the country are hurting somewhat with the political environment these days and in the sense of community. But Maine, more than a lot of states, really has that deep sense of being part of a community first and being everything else afterwards. So I grew up in an area where there were rich people rubbing shoulders with poor people, rubbing shoulders with both parties, and you never really knew any of that part of people. You just knew that, hey, that's Bill from down the road, or that's Nancy, and we're all going to be at the community picnic together. that's the kind of place it was.
It's very interesting because Maine, when you look at the map, it's so surrounded by Canada. And like, I had a Luke Dyer and Van Buren, which again was like they've got a bridge right into Canada, and a border crossing there. And he had family. In fact, he talked about during COVID, family members didn't see each other for like a year, 2 years. And it just seems like there's more connection. And so I wonder if that hospital or that awareness of kind of like, again, community of real more community mindedness, maybe because you're kind of in this far corner where, you've got connection to Canada, you've got connection to kind of Maine, you've got to kind of be your own resource. Like we're not getting the, Maine's not, and I mean, it's been in the news lately because of, again, political chaos. But I think besides that, it's kind of like, no one's coming to bail us out. We got to figure it out up here in Maine. And so,
yeah, that's for sure. It's a fiercely independent group up here. And, a lot of it is, been geographical isolation. A lot of Maine did not catch up with the rest of the country with, more urban areas. And I think that because of that, most of us growing up, rich or poor, we had to learn to do things like start a wood stove or be able to grow gardens to get our vegetables or hunt and fish and things like that. So there is a real back to the lander sense up here. My parents actually ended up here because they were back to the lander hippies way back in the day. And this is where they wanted to be because they felt that this was the state that gave them the best quality of life in terms of being close to the land and really just living off the grid.
Yeah, so fascinating. Again, what draws? Where were your parents? Where were they born? Where did they? When did they come to Maine?
Yeah, so my father's from Western Massachusetts, and he was 21 years old when we came here. I was actually, I have to admit, I wasn't actually born here. I was born in Mason, New Hampshire, and native Mainers will tell you that means I can never be a Mainer because I was 6 months old before we ever got here. But my mother is actually, she was born in Germany.
Oh, wow.
And her family came over because my grandfather is literally a German rocket scientist. And after the war, he was drafted in by Martin Marietta, and, who is now part of Lockheed Martin. He's a rocket scientist. He designed pieces and parts of a whole bunch of things that people know a lot about. Like he was one of the designers on Skylab. He was one of the designers on the space shuttle. So she grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, which is a far cry from central Maine. I can tell you that much. But
so interesting. I just love people's stories. It's so fascinating how we end up where we end up and what leads to what. So is you're growing up in Mount Vernon, again, for the national audience, Mount Vernon is, I think it's kind of between Augusta and Farmington, right?
Yep, it's right in the middle there.
Right in the middle. And again, I think it has about 1,700 people now. What was the size similar to when you were growing up? And did you have any awareness of local government or kind of the public sector as you're growing up?
Definitely no awareness of local government. Mount Vernon's a little bigger now than it was back then because it's become kind of a bedroom community for Augusta and Waterville. But it's not big. I mean, obviously 1,700 people is pretty small. But no, when I was growing up, the farthest thing from my mind would have been local government. I did get interested in state government. When I was in high school, I used to participate in the YMCA Youth and Government program. And that was a lot of fun to me, but it wasn't something I wanted to do. That was just a hobby.
Yeah.
So, but how local government works and the fact that they're not just taxing you for the heck of it and what they do really was not on my radar.
So fascinating. So what is on your radar is animal, veterinarian. I'm going to be a veterinarian. You're going to get a degree in animal science, a Bachelor of Science, but it's from Michigan State University. How in the world does a girl growing up in Maine get on the radar of Michigan?
Well, it was the top veterinary school in the country at the time.
Wow.
And it had a football team that had just won the Rose Bowl. So that was my kicker. I was also, I applied to Purdue, which was my second choice, and a couple other universities as well. But Michigan State was where I really wanted to go. Obviously, UMaine, I could have gotten the same animal science degree, but there wasn't a veterinary program there. So I decided to go out of state. Ended up there for 25 years.
Yeah, well, tell us about that, because you end up getting your degree, and so maybe it can open up the mind, or it can open up especially like my mind. I grew up on a ranch, and so we had vets come out all the time, and so in fact, I just met a friend of mine, was up from Florida. He they did the Alaska cruise, so everybody flies. They come into Seattle, and I got to entertain everyone. It was fun, but he brought his friend. One of his best friends is a vet. He's one of the premier vets for like the fancy horse race track, and so he works on these like $1 million horses. It was crazy, and he was telling me about this world and kind of what he was doing. But again, it's not like everyone you just graduate and are like, oh, I'm just going to go be a vet. Like, I think that people don't realize sometimes, it's not like everyone's, there's a lot of opportunities, and how does even someone get into that world? What was that like when you graduated? What kind of kept you from being a vet, and how in the world did you end up working for Lansing, the city of Lansing?
Yeah. So one thing they don't explain to you when you're a starry-eyed kid who has their dreams of what they want to be is what the path to get there actually takes.
Yeah.
Michigan State was a very highly sought after university. They accept 100 students per year to the veterinary program, and 80% of those are in-state Michigan residents. So despite having pretty good grades and a really killer GRE score, I didn't even get an interview, because you're literally, for 20 spots, you're competing with the rest of the country and people from outside the country for these last 20 spots. So I thought I would go to work for a year and try to establish my residency, although I would have had to be estranged from my parents, because there's that age 24 thing. You're still, now I think it's age 26, but back then it was 24. You're considered your parents' dependents for things like in-state residency and things like that. They still count you as your parents unless you can prove that you're fully independent, which usually means you've married somebody else, or you're declared estranged from your parents, which nothing could have been further from the truth for me. But I thought, if I start working and I become completely independent of the education system, then when I come back, I've been working full time and paying taxes in Michigan. They have to call me a resident. So I applied for the job at City of Lansing, mostly because the city had a zoo. And one of the qualifications for the zoo was an animal science degree. And I thought, well, as openings come open, if I'm already in the city, that should be a shoo-in to get me into the zoo. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Because another thing I didn't understand at that age was unions. Michigan's a big union state, and they had 5 unions in the city of Lansing. The zoo was UAW, and my job that I took with the parking and transportation office was a Teamster. So basically, it was just like applying from outside of the town if you were anybody else. At the time I applied there, it was supposed to be just a stopgap. It was 3 years to vestment in the retirement system then. And I remember thinking, there's no way I'm going to make vestment. 3 years, right? That's crazy. But I started out as a payroll clerk, and then I moved over to the Violations Bureau lead worker. And I just kind of discovered I actually kind of like this work. I kind of like working with the people coming through the door. So 3 years in, an opportunity came to get promoted to the operations supervisor, which is basically there's 2 people that manage all of the attended parking in the city, which includes all the ramps, all the baseball parking, all of that stuff. And I got that. And then I was like, I got to see another side of how local government worked. And that was like, I really like doing this. And I just got progressively more responsibility. After another 3 years, I ended up moving back to be the office manager over the Violations Bureau. And that was more budgeting and the finance stuff that I really got into. And then in 2002, the opportunity came for me to move over to the operations and maintenance division, which is really anywhere else you would just call it public works, as their senior administrator. And man, did I love being in public works, because that's where I got to see how all of the infrastructure of a town works, what it goes into to maintain roads, maintain sewers, to maintain the entire fleet. We had refuse and recycling programs that were, curbside pickup. Then we absorbed park maintenance a few years after that and forestry. And so it was a really broad picture of all the things that happen to keep a community running. To me, the three pillars of local government, I can't believe I don't include administration in this, but to me, the pillars are public works, police, and fire, because those are the services that really mean the most to people when it comes to their quality of life and their sense of health and safety. And so public works to me is really the unsung heroes of that triad. And I just absolutely love being there. I loved my Tonka trucks. I loved snow. I loved it all. So when people ask me how I landed in local government, it's purely by accident. I had one of my employees when I got the first supervisory job. She wanted somebody else to get it. And she said, I bet you got this job just because of your degree. And I said, the herding instinct does help because there's a lot of truth to that when you're working with large groups of people. Mm-hmm. But it just fit for me. And I found out that I loved it. Mm. So it wasn't a straight path. And I like to tell people now that I don't care what you're going to school for. I talk to the entering class at Maine Farmington every year, actually the spring and fall semesters. And I always tell them, whatever you're going to school for, there's a way it fits into local government.
Yes.
Tell me what you're studying and I can find a way that it works for local government, and we need you.
I love that you just said that, because I believe I've been, preaching from the mountaintop the same thing. And that's one of the things we want to do in the next year ahead is go out on this kind of tour, visiting cities, telling their stories, but going into colleges and saying, hey, like you said, you might have a passion for something, but you also might not have any idea how hard it is to get into that field. And I'm telling you, there is a field for you in local gov that not only are there options and availability, there's also missional, meaningful work that you will see your impact on a day-to-day basis. And so I love that you said that. I also love the Tonka trucks. Maybe I missed my calling as a kid because I named my first pony's name was Tonka because I loved me and my Tonka trucks. And so I miss my public works calling. Go back for a moment just to, like we said, encourage maybe young people. When you talk about these three first positions in transportation and parking, right? Transportation and parking. And you mentioned multiple things. You've got people don't realize that it's local gov has its fingers in all of these areas to, again, make infrastructure, not just the underground, the streets, but also events and all these things happen. You can't just, if you want a functional downtown, you've got to have parking, you got to have services. And we're talking about Lansing, Michigan. Again, population 114,000. The metro area is like 480,000. It's the capital city of Michigan. So it's got a lot of people coming in and going out and all kinds of things going on. Tell us about those three positions, senior clerk. You said the clerk was, maybe you were connecting more with people. You were doing some more kind of, I don't know if that was people coming in to pay bills, but maybe as a clerk and then a supervisor and then a manager. What were some of the things? Because again, when you think about someone who was interested in being a vet, you're thinking about, not really people work. You're thinking, maybe vets don't like people. I just want to be with the animals that don't talk, and you want care and empathy. But what was it about that work that made you say, man, I had no idea this even existed. And then all of a sudden it helped you even find talent and skill and kind of wiring that you had that you enjoyed doing. What was that like?
I think initially in the clerk work, a lot of what I did that really got my juices going, I guess, was problem solving and coming up with better ways to do things. Lansing may be big, but it's like any other local government. You tend to get stuck in the way you do things. And I used to ask, why do we do this way? And the answer would always come back, well, historically. And I came to know if something started out with, well, historically, it was probably time to take a look at it. Yeah. And I had a lot of opportunities to streamline processes, come up with new ways to do things, just to make my work more efficient. So that was one thing that I really, really got into. Then there was working with the public. And I was never one of the primary people on the front counter, but I did do backup. And when I was the office manager there, I actually was the parking referee, which is entertaining to say the least. So I was the first step before going to court to plead your case as to why you parked in that handicap zone, or why you shouldn't have to be held to not parking on the street overnight and things like that. So you got to see a lot of the worst in people, but sometimes you really got to see the best too. I can tell you horror stories about people coming in, and just being angry and wanting to yell and stuff. But it got to the point where that stuff just rolls off your back. You don't even worry about it because the group that you work with really becomes a family. And, we're able to laugh about it behind the scenes and just like, can you believe that guy? And, we still do that now here in my job. Everybody's very close that has to be the front facing for the people. But the other thing I got to do was help people figure things out, like especially when it was coming to the supervisor job with event parking and things. One of my jobs was to coordinate with the local events chamber and make sure that we set up specific parking arrangements for whatever groups they had coming in. And sometimes it meant, juggling some stuff around and really doing some different things to make sure things could work for, say, a wedding or a big fundraiser event or a home show that brought tons of people into the community. That was, I really liked the networking and the coordination. I liked getting to work with the other departments and emergency services and stuff when it was going to this planning to try and come up with how we were going to make everything work and keep people safe. I just really got into the whole thing. And really, my desire was always to learn something new. So every time something came new, and I think that's why I changed positions so many times early on. I mean, yes, I wanted to move up the ladder, but it was also something new. And that really fed me. So that's kind of where I just really enjoy. And I did enjoy transportation and parking. The other part of it that I didn't know before I got there was like, how do all the street lights work? How do all the traffic lights work? Because I got tasked with being the backup for the traffic engineer whenever the traffic lights went down. I had to go learn how to do that system and like fix the traffic light remotely if I could. And that was fascinating to me. I mean, I know I'm a geek. I really am. I love this stuff, and I know for a lot of people that probably doesn't sound exciting, but it's kind of cool when you're driving down the road to look up and there's a stoplight and you go, I know how that works. I know exactly how it gets fixed. I know why it cycles the way it does. I know about the loops in the pavement that trigger it. So that also was really cool stuff to me. I really liked it.
I think many people assume the AI and all of the new technology coming out, it's something reserved for large cities and urban counties with big budgets and dedicated IT teams. That is simply not true. Whether you serve in a rural township, a village, a small town, a city, or a county of any size, AI can help your organization work smarter, improve your resident service, and give your team back valuable time to focus on the work that matters most. Tyler Technologies is helping local governments of every size put practical AI solutions to work, helping make communities more efficient, more resilient, and better prepared for the future. To learn how your organization can begin using AI today in helpful ways, visit tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if you'll be attending the GMIS Meets Conference in Virginia, be sure to stop by the Tyler Technologies booth and join the AI at Work general session held on Monday afternoon to see firsthand how local governments are putting AI to work in practical, meaningful ways. Now, back to the conversation. I think, again, that's why I get so fascinated with local gov is there's so many, again, these I call them the underground infrastructure realities that some of them are literally underground, like you say, as sensors, right. But there's so much that goes into just everyday life that we just have no idea. Like, again, how your water comes to you, how the sewer gets treated and all. I mean, there's so many scientists and data and all kinds of things. It's so fascinating to make our life modern and comfortable. And so from there, you're going to spend a good chunk of time working for the city of Lansing. So you kind of find you don't go back. You don't. It's kind of like, okay, I'm in this, and then all of a sudden you end up in Virginia in the Department of Transportation. How did you get to Virginia, and what was that? What was that a couple years like?
Yeah. Well, after I'd been with the city for quite a number of years, probably 13 years, my boss over at operations and maintenance told me that I was the smartest woman he knew and that I really should be looking at being a city manager sometime. Well, I thought that was pie in the sky thinking. To me, it was like I couldn't even imagine in a city that large being a department head, because it just seemed like you had to have all these advanced degrees and you had to like really know your stuff from the bottom up. And I'm like, I didn't go to school for any of this. I've just picked it up along the way. So he encouraged me to go back and get my master's degree. And I did, mostly at the time to prove that I knew what I already knew, because by that point, particularly with public works, I spent a lot of time working with the crews. I mean, part of my job was to quantify all their work. And if we had a FEMA event, to coordinate with FEMA and tell them everything about what we're doing, which is an incredible process. But things like knowing what chemical formularies were going to work for snow and things like that. I had been working with all of that. So I went, and that's how I ended up at Norwich University. At the time, they were partnering with the American Public Works Association, and the professor for this program at Norwich, the primary guy who was promoting it, was a former president of APWA. So Norwich was the only university that had a public administration concentration in public works. And that's really where I wanted to be. Really, I wanted to be a public works director. Unfortunately, in the city of Lansing, you have to have an engineering degree to become a public works director. And at that point, I had gotten married. I had 2 kids. My husband is a native Michigander, but really didn't want to be there anymore. He wanted to be somewhere warmer. So I started looking for other opportunities. And Virginia was one of several states I applied to up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I wanted to go east, not west, because my family's obviously on the East Coast. So I got the job offer from Virginia Department of Transportation, which VDOT is a behemoth. It's the 3rd largest DOT in the country. And Virginia is not the 3rd largest state. But in Virginia, VDOT does everything with the roads. There are no local, there's 2 in the state. I think Arlington and Fairfax are the only 2 cities that take care of their own roads, at least in 2013 back then. And I could be wrong on Fairfax, but I know there was only 2. VDOT handled everything right down into the neighborhood cul-de-sacs. I mean, they did it all. So that's why it's so big. My job was as a budget and policy analyst, which is a fancy way of saying that I was on a team of 3 people that was supposed to determine what the needs for this $7 billion budget were going to be over the next 2 years. $7 billion. And so each of us were assigned a grouping of assets, and we had to do all these massive metrics. It's where I became an Excel wizard. If it weren't for VDOT, I wouldn't know that as well as I do. And, some of the work was really fascinating. I developed the snow metric that they use, but the rest of it was just really disconnected from the local. I was used to being in Lansing, where I worked directly with the crews. I worked with the sewer crew, the road crew. I worked with refuse and recycling and the fleet. And I was intimately aware of what it took to do their jobs and what the requirements were and how they did their work. And so to come into an area where really I was working with people that either had engineering or accounting degrees, but had never really done a frontline type job like I had, I just felt like I never saw the results of my work. I could never really see the benefit of what I was doing. And it just felt really disconnected to me, and I wasn't happy there. So I only stayed for 2 years.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think of Arthur Capello is it Brunswick?
No, he's in Berwick.
Berwick, that's right. I get all my names mixed up. He's in Berwick, and I think he again, same kind of story. He was I think he was a town manager. He was working in local gov, and then he just kind of got burned out, and so he took a job working for the state. I can't remember the state of Maine or where he was, And he just said, yeah, it was just so disconnected. It felt like, man, once you've been, I think, in local government and you not only, again, you're working and seeing your impact on people, but like you say, there's the crews, you kind of have this, it's a unique environment to be working missionally for people, this community that you reside in, but also like with people. And once all of a sudden, again, some people are wired for the state and federal levels that like, just put me in a room and just let me think and be a wizard. Many people aren't, and they're looking for that purpose. They're looking for that camaraderie. They're looking for more impact that they can see. And again, I think it's just a unique reality of local gov. I want to go back just for a second because you had mentioned that kind of leader, mentor person in Lansing had mentioned to you that you'd be a good city manager. When did the position of, a lot of people can work for a city for their whole career and never even engage with the city manager. It's just kind of some figure off in the administration department. What was your interaction with the city manager? When did that role kind of become part of your awareness? And it was that when even though you said you got your MPA more focused on public works and being a public works director, was there any idea of city management? When did that kind of come on the radar for you?
Yeah, well, I honestly thought that, first of all, City of Lansing has a mayor-council form of government, so there was no city manager. There are cities in Michigan that have a city manager or a town manager, but it wasn't really on my radar until my boss mentioned it to me. And even then, I was just thinking that must be such a hard job to get, and it must take so much experience and skill that I would never qualify for something like that. That one thing that big government tricks you into thinking is that you need to be extra special to climb the ladder. In fact, what I have found out since becoming a manager of a small town is that I have to know so much more because in Lansing, if I had a question about HR, I had an HR department. If I had a question about budget, I had a budget department. If I needed to interact with code enforcement, they had their whole department and the people that knew what they were doing. And these people had degrees in all of that. So I really only had to know enough to deal with my little department. And then there was still backup if I got stuck. There's not really any backup when you're a manager of a small town. You wear a lot of hats. I am currently the HR director. I am the finance and budget person. I'm the road commissioner. Even though we've got a public works director, for some reason, I'm still the road commissioner. One thing that I didn't ever have to think about was welfare, general assistance. That was something that was either done at the county or state level, not something that towns do. But in Maine, that's what towns do, welfare. You have to learn all these different things. You have to know about DEP requirements from a lot of different standpoints, not just, water and sewer. It's just, there's so much to know. And you're really, when you get into one of these jobs, you're drinking from the fire hose. And that's why I'm so thankful that I did have public works and law enforcement in my background, because I at least had a very good understanding of two of the bigger functions of a town. Mm-hmm. And I was also very lucky when I came in to have an assessor in our town that was, a 35-year plus person who could really start explaining to me how the tax revenue side of things work, because again, not something I ever had to deal with. I was working in an enterprise fund or strictly out of general fund. And I never had to worry about taxes because, quite frankly, in Lansing, the taxes funded only 7% of what we did. Everything else was either state or federal funding or dedicated tax dollars, or it was enterprise. Not tax dollars, I'm sorry, dedicated assessments.
Fascinating. So, again, these are the realities, right? And it's not like you can go back and get a Maine specific MPA that's going to give you that. You got to figure it out on the job. And that's why we'll talk about resources like the MTCMA, or, how is it? How does someone get all that education? Like you said, this is why also one of my concerns is we've got a lot of people retiring. And then these retirees are people who a lot of them have been in that one role, is that public works director for 30 years. They and especially if you're a smaller town, if you're under, 10,000, that public works director is probably oftentimes in the field. they know how to speak. They know the magic incantations to find the right pipe and to, when there's issues. When they're gone, it's not like they've been thinking about passing that down to, the next generation of people. So how do we keep that? I just had on, I'm trying to remember who that was, Pennsylvania, Brian Poster, and he was talking about how AI and some of the technologies are helping capture some of that. Because how do we store that? It's kind of like the same thing. If we're just writing things down in a file cabinet, man, that's hard. You to go through all that to find, the piece of information you need. How can we use technology to sift through all that to help us? Because it's too much for one person to know. Your brain can't hold all that information. Talk to us about, again, after the Virginia Department of Transportation, you go to Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office and you get that kind of, now you're going to work in another field of local government. Tell us about what that experience was like, especially now you've worked for a city, you've worked for a Department of Transportation for the state, and now you're going to work for a county. You kind of get all these unique experiences in all these unique departments. What was that experience like?
Well, I will say working for a county in Virginia is very different from working in a county in Maine. Maine county government is a little bit nebulous. None of us are 100% sure what counties do, and they may do different things. I mean, you still got the jails and you still have the sheriff's office and you still got courts. But beyond that, it can be very different. In Virginia, the counties, other than roads, the counties basically do all the same functions as a local government because there are very few incorporated towns that actually have local government. Most of the services are provided at the county level. So it was a little bit more like being back in a municipality, only much bigger. Chesterfield's the third largest county in Virginia. It sits just south of Richmond. And it's politically, it's a very conservative county. My sheriff, obviously elected, and he was great to work for. He was a true mentor. I think moving into law enforcement, I think what that really taught me was more of the polish, more of the policy type stuff. I mean, there's always going to be operations. I was responsible for maintaining or making sure we had the monies to maintain a jail and understanding how service of papers worked. And my group directly was responsible for all of the logistics stuff, ordering cars and outfitting them and things like that. But then a big part of my function was to be at all these events with the sheriff and be able to give him instant answers when someone would ask something about anything with our budget or anything with our personnel, things like that. I was supposed to be able to provide those answers. And so I got to watch a lot of the political side of the job with him. He was really big on public outreach and selling the sheriff's office. And, it's a lot of what I had previously thought of when I was in public works is kind of like, probably I didn't think of it very favorably, to be honest. And, it was funny because we used to always call the police department in Lansing going over to the dark side. And there I ended up in a sheriff's office. But it was a big sheriff's office, about 350 deputies. One thing that's very strange in Virginia in the larger counties is that they have both a sheriff's office and a police department. The sheriff's office handles the jail, it handles the courts, it handles service of papers, and there's a large outreach branch of the office. But the actual patrol usually happens in the police department. They're the actual enforcement arm. Not that the deputies can't do that same thing. They've actually got broader powers than the police department, but their day-to-day function is not to be out there doing traffic stops or, responding to burglar alarms or anything like that. So it is a little bit different. But I can tell you that the personality group that you deal with in a paramilitary organization is very, very different from public works, where most of the guys are very blue collar and very informal. So I really learned, I had to negotiate my way around being much more, I don't know what the right word is. I wouldn't necessarily say polished 100%. Around the sheriff, definitely. But with the deputies themselves, even though we would, still have a lot of camaraderie, it was a different thing. Law enforcement needs to be recognized, and they need to be praised. They're a little high maintenance. I guess is the way that I would put it. Right down to making sure that the insignia we put on their uniforms is the exact right piece. I mean, I can tell you I had to return an entire shipment of lapel pins because they were etched rather than polished. They weren't right. So even just learning the different things that you put on a uniform is like an incredible amount of data. But the other thing being on the command staff was that I also ended up at all the meetings. I went to every single board of supervisors meeting, which is like the commissioners of another county in Virginia. It's a board of supervisors. And I often would be the one that was there to present issues that had to do with the sheriff's office or answer questions that had to do with anything going on in the sheriff's office. So I was in the public eye a lot more than I had been, and really learning how to give people information that they may not necessarily want to hear, or to an audience that is somewhat hostile because they see you as the enemy. And on the flip side, some of the people just, law enforcement is the best thing ever, and you can do no wrong. So there was a broad spectrum there. I worked with the county administrator quite a bit, and that's probably more where I got my firsthand look at what an administrator does. A top, basically the CEO of an organization, because I hadn't really dealt with that before. But I did work pretty closely with him on a lot of stuff that had to do with the sheriff's office and other initiatives that the county was trying to get going. Being one of the first responder groups, I was involved with a lot of things that allowed me to get a much broader view of how emergency services all work together. So I was on the technology advisory board for public safety. I was on the radio and communications board. We had a board to hire a new psychologist to deal with police, fire, and sheriff after an incident, and also to have ongoing training for peer support and things like that. So I really got into a lot of other areas that I hadn't been into before with public works, and it was just a more policy level position. So I think that it built my confidence, and maybe I am able to step up into something bigger. But still, I was not a department head. I was command staff, but not a department head. So I still kind of thought of department heads as those really big people, that have it all going on for them. So
it's such a fascinating journey to see you getting all this unique experience in all these unique places, and especially working for a county, like you say, for the sheriff, an elected position. So now you're getting to see kind of, again, the political aspect. I can't imagine. It's so interesting county with these basically department heads who have to go get elected and do their job. It's just like, I can't imagine if a city had to have all its department heads go get elected. Like, well, how would they get anything done? There's so much work to do.
Well, we do have some of that in Maine. For instance, our county here, the treasurer is elected. In Skowhegan, the road commissioner is elected. And, how do you know you're getting somebody who's actually qualified for the job when they're being elected to those positions based on just people know who they are? Or we've always lived in this community, and Sally's always been the treasurer. I'm just going to vote her back in, and that can lead you into some problematic areas. And we've had some examples in this state recently where there've been some fairly large budgetary problems that have happened from not having people that really have that background and training to do what they're being elected to do. I could tell you the first time that the sheriff was up for reelection, and he says to me, you better hope I get reelected, because if somebody else gets elected, they're going to bring in their own command staff. I was like, wow, I better go stumping for the sheriff. So it's a unique position in that way too, that you really have a vested interest in this guy or gal getting elected, because you want to keep your job.
Yeah.
But, fortunately, the sheriff I worked for, there's a lot of things we didn't see eye to eye on, but I truly believe he had a lot of forward vision. He created the HARP program, which is the premier opioid program in the country. It's actually had documentaries done nationally and internationally. That's a real, actually, there's recently been a movie done about it. So it's gotten a lot of recognition as being one of the most successful programs in the country in terms of recidivism. an addiction. It's pretty amazing. It started out as the heroin addiction program for inmates, and it has now turned into, they call it something else now, still with the same acronym of HARP, but it's something else. To have been there on the ground floor of that getting launched, and my job in that was just to find the money to allow us to do it and lobby the Board of Commissioners to give us the money in the budget to say that we really want to do this program and it's going to be groundbreaking and it's really going to help people. That was my only involvement. As far as the vision for the program, that was all the sheriff, and it was amazing. So that's not something I ever would have had the opportunity to be involved in had I not taken that side trip down a road I never thought I'd go, which was sheriff's office. It just wasn't something I ever thought I'd be involved in.
Then you're going to take a little detour again. You're going to work for the Otis Wood Agency. I think, am I right? This is in Georgia?
Yes. My husband got relocated, and it's easier for me to find work than him. So we decided to relocate to Georgia. And there weren't a whole lot of jobs at my level that were available. And I really wasn't getting callbacks on interviews. I got a couple of them, but they just wanted very specific things. One of them I failed because I didn't quantify a question about analyzing whether we should get electric vehicles or not the way they thought I should. But again, I wasn't looking at upper administration. I was trying to get in with individual departments, either another public works department or something in the refuse and recycle line or something like that. I needed to work. So I took this job with Mike Otis, and it was just me and him. He's the sales guy, and I was the business manager. We made a fantastic team. I learned more than I ever thought I would about health insurance and employee benefits, and I learned to write employee handbooks. I'd done some of it before, but these were ones where, you needed to make sure that all the legalese was done. It wasn't procedural. It was, this is the document you go to know how your employees are going to be treated, what their benefits are going to be, how the work is going to run as far as an operation. And I hadn't done that before. So despite being completely out of my field, it did give me another whole look at the benefits side of what we do. And I've been able to transfer that into this job because now I also sit on the board for the Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust. And now I have a very good understanding as we're talking about, what we're going to do with our plans, what choices we need to make for affordability and things like that. I actually get it because I did that work before. So, and being on the trust means that I can help be part of the group that provides our insurances for our municipal employees in the state and try to get them as good of a offering as we can while not breaking their backs with the premiums. So, so it worked out. Georgia was a great experience. I actually loved the state. It was a little hard to leave because I really did love it down there. But 2 years, I wasn't in local government at all.
Wow. Well, and yeah, I love that. You have this kind of what can feel like a hiatus or can feel like, man, what, this isn't what I'm really wanting to do. And yet it's teaching you something. It's giving you the skill set that you're totally going to use. I think that's where, just to encourage both young people and maybe people who feel like, maybe they're in their 40s and are like, man, I don't know. What am I going to do with the second half of my life? I'm trying to figure it out. But I look at my life and it's kind of a Forrest Gump smorgasbord of weirdness. And it's like, you know what? Local gov, you might be able to use all of that unique knowledge in this sphere of local gov.
It's funny because my husband used to be a roofer, and he's been working for T-Mobile in the tech department for the last 15 years, and he's getting really burnt out. And I looked at him one day, I said, you know what? I said, this state needs code enforcement officers. You have to go through the training and take a test, but it's not that hard. It's going to cost you a little bit of money, but you are guaranteed to get employed. Because every town in the state, either we have a code enforcement officer that we're worried we're going to lose, or we don't have the code officers that we need. So it's kind of like a guaranteed employment situation. And I think I've finally convinced him. He can't come work for me, of course, but and my code of officer's been here 40 years, so I'm kind of blessed that way. But he'll retire someday.
Yeah.
But just to get him, at first he would kind of poo-poo me and say, well, I don't have the background that's going to be, for local government. I said, you exactly do, because we need people who understand construction and understand how to look at construction product and say, yes, that is up to code, or no, that is not up to code. We need those people. And I talk to students at University of Maine at Farmington all the time, because they bring me in to do the welcome ceremonies and to do the commencement. And I always tell them, especially the incoming classes, if you ever want to come take a look at local government, please get in touch with me and we'll bring you over, whether it's an internship or just a day shadowing people. I said, I guarantee you, whatever it is you're here to study, I can find a way that it fits, because local government is just this big hodgepodge of everything we need in our everyday lives. So, and it works best when we can bring skills from all different walks of life and backgrounds, and it becomes that true melting pot that allows us to provide the best services to the people.
Absolutely. Oh, so good. Okay, so here you are. You've taken this. You've been to Michigan. You've been in Virginia, and then you have this. You get warm in Georgia. Remember, that was the thing. Your husband wants to leave Michigan. He's tired of freezing his rear end off. And then, how in the world do you end up in Maine? Then how do they? Not only is Winslow going to get you to come back home, but they're also going to get you're going to become a town manager. You're just like right into it. We're just going to do it. Tell us how has this happened?
I thought that was pretty crazy myself. Unfortunately, the move to Georgia precipitated a divorce. So I was kind of, and now I was no longer married. I have the 2 kids, and I'm struggling to make ends meet on the salary that I'm making. So I know I'm going to have to do something, whether I stay in Georgia or not. And a good friend of mine from high school happens to be on the Winslow Town Council. And he says to me, this job's coming open and you'd be perfect for it. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, first of all, I've been out of government for 2 years. Who's going to even look at me seriously? I said, second of all, you guys have to have somebody local picked out for this job. No, you got to apply. He hounded me for 3 weeks. I finally put in an application just to shut him up. I really didn't think I'd get it. I had my first interview. It went well. They called me out for a second interview. So sad I had to come to Maine in July for a personal interview, visit the family and stuff. And that went well. So then I got the call, and then I had a big decision to make. Am I going to make a third cross-country move in less than 10 years and uproot the kids again? Because, my daughter was 5 when we moved to Virginia. She spent 5 years there, and then we moved to Georgia, 2 years there. I mean, I'm taking my kids in and out of schools. They're not making those long-term friendships that come from growing up with the same group of kids. But they are getting a lot of exposure to multiple areas. So I'm looking, I'm going, I don't know. And I really like it in Georgia. I don't want to take the kids away from their dad. I don't want them to move schools again. I have some really good friends I've made down here. And then one of my friends looked at me and he said, I see you light up when you talk about police cars and dump trucks. He said, you need to do this. He said, we'll miss you, but he said, this is what you're passionate about. He said, you're not passionate about what you're doing in the insurance world. You're passionate about all these things that are like very physical things in the local government world that most of us don't even get. And then the kicker was that my parents are still up here. So yeah, I bit the bullet. I was scared to death, but I made the choice. And we moved back up here right in the middle of the pandemic. Which was a whole experience in itself. Forget this being a first town manager job. Do it right in the middle of the pandemic. So that's how I ended up back here, and sure that I wasn't going to do well at it. There's no way I know how to do all this. And but again, I got settled in. I found out that I loved having my hands in all these parts, the things that I didn't know before. It's like, oh, how does that work? I mean, so, and I'm just a lifelong learner. I like getting my hands there. I like to understand how things work. And, but the biggest thing that I have loved coming back to this area is the network environment with the other managers. I had 3 other managers that were really close to me that picked me up by the shoulder pads and said, come with us. We're going to show you how it works. And these are still very good friends of mine 6 years later. They used to call us the Central Maine power force. Was these 4 women from Central Maine towns, and we used to get together once a month for dinner. We'd talk about everything that was going on in our towns and gripe to each other about things that nobody else could possibly understand. But also, we were there to lift each other up. And, because invariably one of us would be having a really hard time with something, and the other 3 would be there to say, you got this, you're strong, you've got these skills, you're going to come through this, and bounce ideas off each other. How's this going to work? And that's something that I never had in any other job. The network of managers up here is just amazing.
I have this unique pleasure, this unique opportunity to meet with thousands of local government leaders from across the nation every year through conferences and workshops and the podcast. Just these interviews, these conversations are just so insightful. And one of the things I have learned about local government leaders is this: the best leaders are lifelong learners, not because they have all the answers. It's because they understand that leadership, that journey of leadership, is never finished. Every challenge, every difficult conversation, every budget season, every organizational change or disruption is another opportunity to grow. That's why this summer we're doing something different inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. We're launching a special summer series called Stories That Shape Leaders. You know that every week I take a best-selling book, usually a business book, and we break down its insights and apply them to local gov. This summer, we're taking biographies, memoirs, timeless leadership books that don't necessarily fall into those typical business, culture, strategy kind of genre. And we're going to explore the lives, the decisions, the failures, challenges, the lessons of leaders who navigated incredible adversity, who had to build trust when hope was fleeting, who inspired others not only to dream but to take action, and who left a lasting impact. Leadership isn't shaped just through strategies and frameworks alone. It is shaped through stories. Stories that challenge assumptions, stories that expand our perspective, stories that help us become the leaders our communities need us to be. When you join the MLDC, you unlock the entire summer series, but you unlock even more. You unlock the weekly leadership content, the live mastermind sessions, the nationwide community of local government leaders, and all the MLDC resources, not just for the summer, but for the rest of 2026. If you are looking for a place to continue growing this summer while connecting with leaders who understand the unique challenges of local government, I would love to invite you to join us. Learn more at haltingwinter.com/MLDC or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. So cool. So Winslow, again, this is right next to Waterville. I was just chatting with Nick Cloutier, the city manager down there. And again, 8,000, you get, not only is this your first town manager position, like you said, it's the pandemic, which totally changes everything about how, we function, how we do city halls, how we, even serving and making sure services are still happening. I mean, I can't even imagine being in that role for the first time. And yet,
first day I had a gentleman, he was our local anti-masker. My very first day, he came in and wanted a meeting with me, and it was to demand that he didn't have to wear a mask because he didn't agree with self-asphyxiating. I told him we could meet, but it had to be out in the gazebo outdoors, so he didn't have to wear his mask. I mean, he resurfaced over and over again. He actually became kind of a local celebrity. He got thrown out of every grocery store and every state office and every town office in the entire region. And the amazing thing was his wife's a nurse. But that was the very first interaction I had with the public in Winslow, was this guy who's like, I'm not wearing a mask, but I'm coming in because this is my building. I'm the public. We own this building. So
again, these are the things that would never be possible at the state level, especially at the federal level, right? And yet, that's what people don't understand. Your local government impacts your life far more, impacts it every day in the services and in the the community realities that you experience, and you have access to go in and right, have a meeting with the town manager. And people again think that, I see, oh well, I see Doge on my news network and I need to go down and be Doge to my city hall, and it's just like, dude, you have no idea. Like, we're just trying to make sure that our roads are getting patched, that our services are being delivered, that the cops are, that we have enough officers to actually respond to things as they happen. And so that's why, again, we just exist to try to do this. But obviously you for your first time in that seat, you must have been, we know that you're awesome because you were called a Rising Star Award. You got the Rising Star Award from the MTCMA in 2022. So obviously, like you say, it fit this. One of the things you said about learning and curiosity, I find that if there's a common theme among all the people that I interview over now 350 plus, almost 360 episodes, over 360 episodes, it's curiosity. I think that a great city manager is curious. And like you say, because you need to have curiosity. Now, if you get stuck in the weeds and have to know exactly all the things, I think you'd be overwhelmed because there's too much to know. There's too much to hold. But you do need a curiosity so that you can branch these things together, right? How do you get these departments to work together? How do you make sure that resources can be shared, that, energy can be shared so that we're getting the things done that matter most? And it's such a unique role. Talk about, is you're going to become the town manager of Farmington in 2023. This is more, I would look at the map and say this is kind of central Maine, but you correct me. What do they, where do Maine people see that Farmington is?
Supposedly we are Western Maine.
Western Maine.
But we are considered the gateway of the mountains. Pretty much if you want to go to any of the ski resorts or hiking trails and stuff that the state is known for, as far as the state parks and lakes and things like that, you are going to go through Farmington. We're kind of the crossroads. So we have a lot of people come through. They stop at the town office because they need a temporary hunting or fishing license, or they need to register their ATV or their boat for their weekend up here. So we see people from all over the place, even though a lot of places will go, wow, Farmington's pretty small and you're kind of like stuck out there on your own. Farmington is also the county seat, and it's a really unique town. When the opportunity came for this job, there was a lot of turmoil in Winslow, but that's not why I left. I was actually very loyal to Winslow and had to be convinced to make the jump because I have a hard time with that personally. Like, I feel like I'm letting people down if I leave. And I had a lot of irons in the fire that I really wanted to see finished where I was. But this town, as you noted before, Mount Vernon is in the direct line between Farmington and Augusta. I spent a lot of time in this town as a kid. And my stepfather, who has been my stepfather since I was 16, his family lives here. His sister, Diana, was married to the firefighter fire captain that died in the explosion in 2019 that made the national news. So I have a lot of personal ties to this specific community. My grandmother, my stepfather's mother, she was the secretary to the dean of the college for 30 years. So I know a lot of people in this community, but if I don't, chances are we're only 1 degree of separation. There's a gentleman on my budget committee, and his last name's Tracy, which is my stepfather's last name. So I asked if he was related. And we kind of walked through it because he wasn't sure about my stepfather, but we walked through the family line. And it turns out his father and my stepdad's father are first cousins. So we're all like right in this group. So Farmington has been a homecoming in a way that just coming back to Maine couldn't match.
Yeah.
This is a town that I absolutely love being in. And it still feels like old time Maine from the standpoint that, yes, we have people who are very staunchly Republican. We have people who are dedicated Democrats, but they may argue with each other, but they still sit down at the chicken barbecue together. They still socialize together at these various events. And, sometimes they may go, oh, Dick's just spouting off about the Republican stuff again, or, Scotty's over there talking about the Dems again. But they don't, it's more like oh, that's just them. It's not this, I really can't stand you because you're on the opposite side of me, which is more how I grew up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big difference between Winslow and Farmington is Winslow had very much more of a social divide. The only thing that was really tying Winslow together as community was the high school. And outside of that, people really didn't agree on a lot. There just wasn't this sense of neighbor helping neighbor and everybody being involved. Farmington, we do not struggle to fill our boards and committees. We have lots of volunteers, people that want to be involved in the community. We have good partnerships with the university and the hospital and the county. So it's just a really unique place to be.
It's very interesting to see, again, because Winslow and Farmington are very close to the same size, I think.
Absolutely.
And yet that community vibe is so radically different. And I wonder if it's just, I'm sure there are many variables, but it seems like Farmington has a more rural reality to it, as it's kind of like you say, out what can feel like out in the middle of nowhere. Whereas, maybe Winslow's closer to the main highway and and I don't know what it is, but it's a concern because it's not healthy. It's not healthy when a community, I think part of it is too, we kind of like the urban suburban reality where you kind of come home and you pull into your driveway and you pull into your garage, the garage closes and you don't know anyone. I mean, I experienced this in Olympia. When I lived in the capital city of Washington, like I thought, man, we're finally moving kind of like in this big neighborhood and right downtown. We're going to get to, we're going to walk and meet everybody. I'd never felt so alone in my life. Like no neighbor. I didn't know I know one neighbor only, and we had a relationship even before I moved in there. I never knew anyone during that time because everyone was so like, you almost felt like you were in a zombie movie. Like it was like, I know people live here, but you never saw anyone. It was just so odd. And I just wonder, it's so encouraging to hear that you're in a different environment where, again, people, it seems like maybe when you also care about the community and you can kind of get over like opinions are opinions, we're all going to have opinions, but like we do want to see health and thriving. We want to make sure that this community has an identity that continues to foster flourishing. So then people want to be a part of it. They want to be on boards. They want to be on. It's just unique to see. And that's cool to see that you're a part of that. And, I just interviewed right before we got on India Adams Jacobs. She's in Bowling Green, Virginia. And Bowling Green's her hometown. And it's so unique and a cool opportunity, like you say, to now serve in your function as a town manager with people that you know. And even if there's degree of separation, there's just this proximity that feels like, man, the work I'm doing today, no matter how frustrating it is, no matter how, political or exhausting, this is impacting real people. And they're people I have a deeper, like there's a real connection to, right? It's just such a cool, again, local gov is just such a cool work that like, who else can say that? It's like, you work for Amazon, you're like, well, I don't know, maybe someone I know is going to get this box of books or this box of junk that's going to be in the garage sale in 2 weeks. But man, how cool local gov is. Tell us about what's happening in Farmington. What are some cool things? What are some of the things that you're doing? Are there projects? Are there challenges that, what's going on in Farmington right now that you both are excited about and trying to figure out?
Well, we've been through some challenges recently. We had a revaluation last year. And actually, when they interviewed me and told me they were having a reval, I couldn't believe it because I just came out of one in Winslow. So I looked at them, I said, those are called manager killers. And, it was rough. We were way behind. As a result of being way behind, our taxes got committed very late last year, and they were committed with the wrong information. So that created a lot of distrust among the public that maybe we don't know what we're doing. And at the same time, I was changing our fiscal year from a calendar to a July through June, which means we've also had to navigate this interim 6-month budget. We had 2 town meetings to pass the 6-month budget and then the year budget afterwards. So there's been a lot of change very quickly. And most of the people have been pretty good about it. But when we set the wrong mill rate last fall, it's the biggest meeting I have seen. And I include that with our annual town meeting where people are supposed to come vote on the budget and stuff. We had more people packed in our meeting room here at the town office than we normally have at the community center for the annual town meeting. So between that and, with the revaluation, everybody's values are going way up. And until people see their tax bills, they're instantly like, my value went up 400%. My bill's going to be astronomical, which isn't true. But wrapping your head around how something like that works is very hard. So I spent a lot of time trying to do public engagement on those issues. I did several public meetings that were also televised. We have a wonderful thing here, which is the Mount Blue TV organization. They work through the university, but they not only televise all of our local meetings, anything special I want to do, they put those out there too. So I try to hold a lot of public information meetings just to get the word out, and try to educate people about how things work. Because I think one thing we do particularly poorly in local government is tell our story.
Yes.
We really don't. So when it comes time to have people make a decision, they really don't know what they're voting on. And that's particularly hard in town meeting towns that still you have to go to the people to get your budget passed. And if they don't understand what you need, sometimes that can be a really big hurdle. So, one of the things I've really been focusing on is getting those opportunities to engage with the public. In Winslow, I had started a Coffee with the Manager series. My hope is to get that off the ground here as well. What I would like to be doing is having it at a different location, one of the local businesses every month. So it also highlights that business for people. I just haven't been able to get there yet because we've had some pretty big housekeeping challenges. The seat here was empty for 9 months, and my predecessor left in kind of a hurry, and there were 2 interims. So there was a lot of stuff that hadn't been handled, and it's just really kind of taken a long time to get things back on track. So now that we've gotten those big things out of the way, we are working on a major grant to do a geomorphic study of the Sandy River. We're coordinating with 2 other local communities in Starks and Norwalk. That's going to be a really interesting thing because we've had a lot of issues with flooding. We actually had a major flood here the week after I started, 1 week to the day, December 18th of 23. We had major flooding that flooded there's an area called the Intervale. It's where the Hippick Field, which is the major sports complex here in town, is, the McDonald's, the Walgreens. It's a pretty heavily traveled area. That was completely cut off. And then we ended up cut off to the south and to the west. Basically, Farmington became an island for almost 24 hours. And that was the second flood in 2023. So those were both FEMA level events. And we had a series come through that the county sponsored about a year and a half ago, where a geologist was coming through talking about the geomorphography of the river, how it works, where it's traveled, how a river is really more of a living thing than it is a static thing. And this year, an opportunity came up for community resilience planning monies to be able to actually do a study. We can't change the river, but we can learn how to work with it, and we can learn how to make our community more resilient. So that's a really exciting project that I'm excited to see get off the ground. We've done a lot with communications here this year. We got a $55,000 grant to upgrade our communications program, which includes our website. It includes a 311 communication system, as well as an outreach system that includes not just you can get a text on your phone, but you can get a text, a phone call, an email. There's all these different ways because I think you find in some of these communities in Maine, because we are an older state, we still have quite a few people who aren't all that comfortable with technology. So I needed something that also would allow people to sign up to get an actual phone call when we've got an emergency going on. And the flood of 23 really highlighted that, we did a great job responding to it, but where we found our downfall was in communicating to the public and getting information in from the public about where trees were down and roads were flooded. But then when things were cleared, how do we get the information back out to the public? So that's been a project that I've been wanting to get underway since I started here, but we didn't have the money. So we've actually gotten that fully funded through a grant, which is amazing. We're working on some collaboratives with the university, working on our public spaces. This year, we've got a major road program that's going to rehabilitate Main Street between the area and the Intervale where I just was talking about the flooding all the way up through downtown. And it's also going to allow us to make some major upgrades to Hippick Park, which is the historic park in town. It's over 100 years old. It has beautiful old grandstands. It has a major league field and a little league field. It has a pool. It has all kinds of stuff going on out there. So the historic wall that runs along the street on that is going to be rehabilitated this year along with that project. And in conjunction with that, we also got a $110,000 grant to rehabilitate the oldest skate park in Maine, which is also at that same location. And the rest of the money was raised through donations. So actually, Seth Westcott, who is an Olympian, he's one of the major donors and one of the major supporters. And it was Tony Hawk's father who designed this park called the Dragon's Nest.
Wow.
So we do have some really exciting projects coming up. And there's going to be a little turmoil in the short run because construction is always turmoil, but the end results are going to be some really neat things through the heaviest traveled areas of this town.
It's so cool, all the things that you just mentioned and how various variety, the wide the scope is of them all. I mean, from skate parks to just even road management and and how people are traveling in a river study. I mean, all these unique things that, one person to touch all those things, that would be like, how interesting is it that you can touch all those things what other job could give you the ability to touch so many random things that are so, not really connected? How cool is that? And how cool is it to maybe I won't say cool. I'll say, I will applaud you. I applaud you for the work of coming in, like you said, this is, what did you call it? What was the thing the town went through that you went through in Winslow?
The revaluation, where they reassess all of the property in the entire town.
And that's right. No one likes that. No one's, excited about that. And like you say, then there's a communication. How do we communicate this? Because you're dealing with things that's heavy insider knowledge on how that math works. And everyone's just freaking out that now their bill's going to jump, some outrageous amount. And it is a lot of work to communicate, and do the work then, and still reset things and figure out budgeting and like all these things you're doing behind the scenes, getting the team in. Like you say too, when you go through an interim period, there are a lot of balls that get dropped, and that's not to poo-poo on anybody. It's just the reality of this is why we have town managers. This is why we have professionals sitting in those seats.
When you get an interim in, they're just here to keep the boat afloat. That's all they're doing. Nothing's moving forward. No problems are getting fixed. We're just trying to maintain the status quo until we can get somebody permanent here. And we had two very good interims in here who are long-term managers in the state. We had Cornell Knight, who used to be the manager in Bar Harbor and several other communities prior to that. When we also had Steve Eldridge, both of whom were long-term town and city managers prior to that. So we had skill sitting in this office, but they were only here 2 days a week. So you can't get a whole lot accomplished there. Yeah. But that has nothing to do with the quality of the people.
Yeah.
And my predecessor did have a lot of balls drop. And, here's where I really stress the importance of the network of the Maine Town and City Managers Association and really reaching out to learn from your peers, because I jumped right in when I got here with the MTCMA, and I wanted to have mentorship. I wanted to have a group that I could ask questions when things came up, like this just crossed my desk. I've never seen this before. How do I deal with it? And, the MTCMA community people would always share information. They'd always answer questions. And as a new manager, I really needed that. Now, the gentleman who was in this seat was also a brand new manager, but hadn't even come from local government. And I never saw him at any of the MTCMA meetings. I never saw him ask a question on the listserv. And he failed rather spectacularly. But I think it was because he didn't want anybody to know what he didn't know. And he wasn't willing to get the help of his peers to get him through it.
It's such a great point about, like, you need to have knowledge, but you need to have that curiosity, because you can never know. You're going to be put in different situations, but there's a humility, isn't there? To be like, hey, and that's why, again, like you said, the MTCMA, these organizations are so vital to give you not only insight, but to help you go, oh, you've done it and it worked. Like, that gives you the confidence to go, man, teach me, tell me, so we can try to figure that out here. Like, I do think it is a unique role in that, yes, it is a high level of responsibility. It can feel like you have to have all the answers. Everyone's looking for you for answers, but you don't want to then enter into kind of a fake reality, especially that isolates you from the answers, from the encouragement, from the support. And you're definitely modeling that. That's why, again, I love, coming out and speaking and encouraging you guys to make sure too. I mean, that's usually what I speak on. I do speak on culture and some strategy communication, but I love speaking on well-being, just to remind you that you're a person. You're a human being, not just a human doing, especially in a role that can, that's how I usually end the podcast. I just talk about in a role that doesn't shut off, in a role that, especially what you just mentioned, all the stuff that you've got going on that you went through to try to reset and get an organization moving again. I'm sure you have put in double the hours of what, your contract states. I'm sure that your mind is always right thinking. I think too, in a smaller town, especially when it has a community vibe and you feel kind of a homecoming, there's probably not one place you can go in town where it's like, oh, the town manager's here. Let me tell them about my pothole, or let me tell them about, what I think about this. And so even your weekends aren't really off. And so I always say, like, how have you found time? How is it boundaries? Is it just like this day, these hours, I just don't look at my phone? How have you wrestled with that? And if you, you don't have to be I know there are no czars. There's everyone I talk to, you're just like, I'm a spectacular failure.
I was going to say, I'll tell you when I figure that out. I may or may not be guilty of leaving here at 2 a.m. sometimes. And I actually don't live in the town I manage, and I'm actually kind of a believer in that. And I know some people think you have to live where you manage because that's the only way you're truly connected. I'm connected to the town that I manage in a way I'll never be to the town where I live, because I don't have time to be invested in the town where I live. It's where my house is. I love my home. I love my property. But I have no idea what's going on in Oakland where I live. I mean, really, I don't. I've never been to a town meeting. I don't go to any of the select board meetings because all my time and energy is invested here. When I'm going to volunteer, I volunteer here in Farmington. When I'm going to worry about something that's going on, it's how it's affecting Farmington. I really don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about how it affects me as a taxpayer in the town I live in. So I don't have that instant, I run into people in the grocery store all the time, because that can take over your life. I've heard from other managers who used to live in the town that they manage that it could become overwhelming. I mean, one of my mentor managers, Michelle Flewelling from Fairfield, she told me when she was the town manager in Clinton, where she lives, people would show up right at her house on Saturdays wanting her to register their vehicles.
Yeah.
That's just that it's a step too far, because we do have to step back. And I'm guilty of working way too much. My kids have told me that I'm basically an absent parent. And fortunately, they were at least old enough when we moved back up here that they were fairly self-sufficient, because there's a lot of nights they scrounge for their own dinners. And, I might not see them because I leave before they get on the bus in the morning, that would happen sometimes. So I have missed out in the last few years. Thankfully, thankfully or unthankfully, my kids didn't participate in sports or anything, so I didn't miss out on any of that. But maybe it would have been a good thing if they did, because it would have forced me to get out of my office and stop thinking about work for a minute and just go be focused on my kids. It's hard. I take vacations, but I am invariably on my computer for part of them. Some of that's self-preservation, because I don't want to come back after a week off to 150 emails that I didn't look at already and take an entire day answering them before I can move on to anything meaningful. But part of it is just I haven't been very good at policing myself to just be present in the moment with whatever else it is I'm doing. So yeah. I do try now to take my weekends off. I mean, I answer a phone call if I need to. I usually will check my email once or twice. But I try to actually take that time as much as possible and, do my gardening or go out and do something with the family, just, because that's important. And at the end of the day, the job's the job. You never know who's going to get elected. And if a group gets elected that doesn't like what I do, I'm going to be off to another job.
Yeah.
My family's going to be there forever. So I really need to get some time with them.
Yeah.
And I think these are the types of jobs that it's very easy to get sucked into. I need to do just one more thing. I need to do just one more thing. There's deadlines. They're big. They're looming. There's issues that blow up in your community that you have to put fires out. I mean, that's probably 50% of this job is putting out fires. So I honestly, I don't know what the answer is to make sure that you don't overtax yourself. I haven't found it yet, but I think being conscious of it is probably the first step.
It is, absolutely. And in fact, this is one of the, I think it's the workshop session I'm doing for the conference that's coming up. It's called Balance is BS. How do you thrive in the tension of municipal life and leadership? And just to say two things for you and for the audience listening. The first is that I think you can beat yourself up because you can go, man, like you said, it's not just one more thing, it's 10 more things. Like I got 10 more things I can always do. You always have the weight of all these things you want to be doing. And so you can feel the shame of that. You can feel the weight of that. And then you can feel like, gosh, and then I suck at being a mom. I suck at being, a spouse. I suck at whatever. Like I'm not giving. And the reality is you got to get rid of that shame because what you have is instead is going, no, I just need to be intentional. And I need to have, the intentionals. You're a town manager, and that's a unique demand, and that's a specific demand. And it is going to be some late nights. It is going to be, but what you have to be careful of is that if you let that be every night, then you're toast, right? You have to be able to pull back, like you've said. And again, it's seasonal too. You just went through a season where you had to reset the structure. You had to reset things because again, new mill rates, you just went through a season. Now the dangers, it's kind of like, when you go through a flood, there's a hyper response. Well, if you always live like every day is a flood, you're going to burn out. No one has that energy and that fuel supply. So you do have to go, okay, we just reset. Now things are kind of getting into some stable ground. How can I look at my personal life and reset a little bit and go, okay, I don't need to work every weekend. Now I'm going to take some weekends for the garden. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to reset maybe the communication structure for who can get access and when. And so it's something that always has to be a little bit looked at. But yeah, like you say, I think that's why I like to highlight town management is a unique role because a city doesn't sleep. And the work of a city never stops. It's just, there's always something to do. And I was so grateful for you and your story. What an encouraging and powerful story of I love these unique roads that lead into town management. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for coming back to Maine and impacting two places that are, I'm sure, much healthier now than what they were before.
Well, thank you for your kind words. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, it's so cool. I look forward to coming out just a couple of weeks. I think this is going to air the week before I come out. So this will be good people to listen to on the travel, right? People traveling all over to Maine to go to Sugarloaf Mountain. I think, again, I'm going to go through Farmington to go up to Sugarloaf, right? See?
If you're flying in, there's no way to avoid it. You will go through flight.
There it is. Well, the episode before you is the town manager in Carrabassett Valley, which where I think Sugarloaf is located, and then it'll be you. And so everyone needs to be listening in Maine to these podcasts because now you know the people who are leading the towns that you're going to be driving through or in during the conference. So again, thank you, Erica, for sharing your life, your leadership, and your insights. Really great story.
Thank you.
The stories we share here on the HaltingWinter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.